Hello, Alison. How are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Doing good. I think, well, I don't remember when I we kind of get to know each other.
Well,
Probably,
it was just before the lockdown and we came and played chess with you.
okay,
Yeah,
that's 20.
that's it.
Well, I feel like I know you actually even before that. At least I heard
Yeah,
about
I
you.
guess that, I think maybe maybe with Cheryl Clemens maybe that.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I think
Mhm.
like somehow 2018 is something can start either 2018 or 2019 because I kind of got to know what you are doing. And
Yeah.
I know you work with homeschool and also with I think Indiana home
Yeah, the Indiana
educator.
Association of Home Educators
Yeah,
and
the whole
then IAHE
educators.
Action, which is their sister organization.
Right, right, right.
So one's
So
a
that
C3, one's a C4.
right. And you did actually a lot of legal work for them, right?
I'm not a lawyer, so I can't say that I do any legal work for them. But what I can say is that I'm an advocate and
Right.
yeah, well, I mean, most of my adult life has been spent around public policy and legalese and legislation. So
That's very,
yeah,
very helpful.
yeah,
Uh,
so I'm pretty familiar with reading legislation and that sort of thing, and I can follow the code and all that fun stuff. So
right, right, right.
I can find my way around all the articles and all
Oh,
the this, that, and the others.
that is so cool. That is very, very
Well,
useful skill.
it's tedious.
I know, I know. I mean,
It is tedious work, but
right,
it's really a useful skill, to be perfectly
right. You
honest. So
definitely. In a way, I feel like they did that on purpose so that they can hide something.
well, I mean, I've never worked for the Indiana state legislature, so I
Oh, okay.
can't speak for them.
Right.
But I can tell you from a federal perspective, that is exactly what happens.
Oh,
So,
wow.
um, because I mean, I remember when I first went out there, I first went out there in 1998 in Washington, D.C. and worked for a member of Congress. And we had an individual who he worked in another office, not in my particular office, but we all kind of relied on him because he was the budget guru. And he would
Oh,
literally, so some of the tricks that they would play was they would throw in the budget like 2 days before we were supposed to consider it. And the budget is ginormous. And there's no way the average person is going to get through all of that in like 24 hours. It's just
right,
not going to happen.
right.
Except we had this one crazy guy. I mean, he was a great guy, but he would stay up all night long reading this thing, trying to find all these silly little, we call them writers, all these little writer clauses that they would stick in there.
Oh,
Yeah,
wow.
it's a
Wow.
game.
Wow. Wow. I mean, really appreciate what he did.
Yeah.
You need
So
someone like that because they just trying to, put something there so you can pass. A lot of legislators, they don't even bother to read it. It's
Well,
that.
so a lot of people have a lot of problem with that, but I can tell you the number of bills that come through and the size of those bills, there's no way any one human
You
can
can read.
read all of that and vote on legislation and keep the legislative calendars going. It's just not possible.
Right.
And then often there's a lot of bills that are the exact same ones that they've seen before, and it's just being updated. So there's really
Right.
no reason to read it. And then, of course, there's all the bills that you disagree with from the start. So there's no point in reading it.
Okay. Got
You
you.
know,
Got you.
so people always say, well, you haven't even read it. Well, you know what? Should I really be reading a bill that raises my taxes
Right, right,
and is
right,
going
right.
to harm homeschoolers and is going to, no, I'm not even going to bother. It's just a
Yeah.
no.
So basically you are fighting for home school parents at the
Yes.
federal level.
Yeah. Well, I don't do the federal level anymore.
Oh, okay.
That's where I worked.
Right.
I worked for on Capitol Hill with
Mm.
two different members of Congress. I also worked for a national social issue that was pushing for a constitutional amendment,
Oh, okay.
and I worked for another like trade industry
Oh, okay.
advocacy organization.
I
So
see.
so that was all in Washington D.C. And then I stopped. I actually retired from that line of work when my first son was born, and I went
Oh,
home
okay.
to educate him.
Right.
Well, he was born, and of course, I believe that education starts at birth.
Okay.
So I say that I always like, okay, how old's my oldest son? That's how long I've been homeschooling. So,
Oh, wow. Just since they were born. Wow. So
yeah,
what?
because you are their first teacher.
Right,
A
right.
parent is their
Understand.
first teacher.
Exactly. Exactly.
So
That's something we forgot is because um, government always come in and say, okay, let us educate your kids. It's for free. It's for your own good. You cannot handle it. You are not educated enough. Let the professionals handle it. So
and the irony is those are the people that supposedly educated us, and they're saying we're not educated enough to be able to teach our own children.
right.
Really?
Yep.
Like,
I know. I
well,
know.
then why should I put my child in your care if I'm not
Exactly.
educated enough and you educated me? But
Exactly.
okay. But well, I mean, and that's the thing is that's the message they keep sending to us, and they have for decades, is
Right.
that well, you're not an expert. Well,
Okay.
I'm an expert in my child.
Right. I know
And
my
and
child do
I'm a
way
dyslexia
better.
tutor as well, so I tutor children reading. And my point to my parents that I always make is that I am not the teacher. You are.
Right.
I am merely your support. I am here to teach you how to support your child.
Hmm.
I do not, I mean, I said, I may have greater expertise in a certain area than you do,
Hmm.
but you have expertise in your child that
Right.
I don't have.
Right.
And so this has to be a partnership. And if it's not a
Right.
partnership, it's going to, your child will suffer.
Right.
And so that is the point that I go to. Now I require all my parents to sit in on the tutoring sessions,
Hmm.
because the reality is kids learn best in an organic situation where it just comes up in the world they live in, because they can
Exactly.
see how practical it is. But if the parent is not there and they don't know what I'm teaching, they have no idea that they just let an opportunity pass by them.
Right. Right.
But if they're there and they know what we're saying and we know what we're doing, they're completely up on it. They can say, hey, what did Mrs. Slatter say about?
Hmm.
And all of a sudden it's now in their environment and they can see why it's a useful piece of information.
Okay.
But if the
Okay.
parent's not involved,
It is hard. Yeah. Yeah.
and yeah, go ahead.
So how old is your first child?
My eldest is 15.
15. So you do that. You have done 15 years of home
Yes.
education,
Yes.
and now do you advocate for homeschool parents at the state level?
Yes. At the
Okay.
state level, I do. Yeah. Mhm.
So definitely you somehow you're going to work with the state legislatures, right?
Yeah, I do, and I have done for quite some time.
Mm-hmm.
This isn't my first rodeo. I've been doing politics since I was 14 years old.
Oh,
So I've been in the game for over 30 years. So
14 years ago. What?
30 years, 30
I
years.
mean, 14 years old, you're doing the.
No, 33, 30, 30.
Oh,
Still a long time.
no. I mean, you said you started when you are 14 years old.
14. Mm-hmm.
What did you do at that time? You are not.
Well, that I was forced labor actually. My parents were very involved, and so because I call politics a family sport. It's
Okay.
never the one person who's in it; it's
Right.
everybody else
Yeah,
too.
you have
And
to.
so, yeah, I mean, it's just the way it is. And so, I was forced into. Well, of course, I was 14-year-old, and of course, at the time, what did 14-year-olds do all the time? Well, before the advent of texting, hi, we were all always on the phone, right?
Uh,
So my stepdad thought that was a great idea. He's like, well, hey, I need to make a phone call to all these houses in my precinct. Why don't you find out if any of them need to be registered to vote or need an absentee ballot? So, so he put me to work
wow.
making all these phone calls at 14 years old to complete strangers.
Wow.
And then if somebody needed to be registered to vote or anything like that, then I would have to make an appointment time for my
Wow.
parents to go out and meet with them and get the,
Wow. That's
yeah.
amazing. That's amazing. Well, that's basically a homeschooling experience.
Yes. Well, and funnily enough, I mean, I was public schooled. Actually, I went to
Right.
Perry Meridian High School here on the
Right.
South Side. And so that's where I went to school. So I was public schooled, but yeah, I came home from school and I had to make all these phone
Right,
calls.
right,
I had to do
right,
it. I had to do it for the primary and I had to do it for the general every year.
right. But that turns out to be valuable because,
Incredibly, it set me
right,
up in an amazing way, because what ended up happening is I went to college. I thought, oh, politics isn't my thing. It's something I was forced to do. And a couple of years later, I figured out, actually, no, I might actually have like something there. And it was just from what other people had said to me, some interactions I had that I thought, well, maybe I have something.
okay.
And so then I started becoming involved down in the town where my school is. And at the time, the college Republicans and the county party organization worked hand in hand together. And so I ended up working a lot for the county party in that area. But
Which school?
I went to Indiana University Bloomington. So I was I was in the
Whoa.
foxhole with other conservatives because
I
we were
know, I
not
know.
popular.
Right. Wow.
And we're all still friends. I mean, all of us who were college Republicans together are still friends.
That's amazing. You know, that's the bluest.
Yeah, it's I'm not even sure it's blue.
Yeah.
I think it's actually started turning red again.
Really? I love
So
it.
far left, it's red.
I love it. I love it.
But
Yeah.
yeah, no, it's yeah. So I worked
So
on there. And
did you change your major?
no, actually, I have no. Believe it or not, I have no formal training in politics.
So,
I took one political theory class in college, and that was it. That's the only formal training I've ever had.
oh, so what's your major then?
My major is actually speech and hearing sciences, which included language acquisition,
Oh,
development, and disorders.
oh, I see.
So that's
Okay.
why I do dyslexia tutoring.
Oh, got
So
you.
that's
Got
right
you.
down my aisle, and that's yeah.
Right. But
God used it. God used it for
right,
good, because He kept me
right,
out of the really liberal, nasty poli sci
right,
department, right?
right,
And then so that I could stay conservative and be with my friends and not have.
That's good. That's
Yeah,
good.
that was good.
But basically, after you graduate from college, you work. You go to Washington D.C. You work in politics.
I did. I worked for United States House Representative John Hostetler for 4 years, and I left him to work for the Soap and Detergent Association, which was a great job, but it just it wasn't for me.
Wow.
And then I moved over and I worked for an organization called Alliance for Marriage, and it was pro traditional marriage between a man and a woman.
Right.
And so my job actually became doing opposition research. So I understand the other side very, 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 very well.
Okay.
And unlike what they would like to frame me as being a hater, it actually taught me to love gay people and understand and see them from God's perspective, and not from our filtered perspective through sin.
Right.
While sin is still important and it is not something to obviously to mess around with,
Right.
it is also not a reason to not love someone.
Right. Exactly. Because sin's a sin, right?
Absolutely. I have my sin is just as ugly as their sin.
Exactly.
I just hide it better. That's all.
Well, that's basically what the Bible teaches us, right?
Yeah.
The human heart is very wicked.
Yeah. But the thing is that I know first and foremost that they were created with the image of God.
Exactly.
And that is where I start. I don't start with their sexuality. I don't start with anything else other than the fact that God loves them.
Well, yeah. And also, I know some gay people, so I kind of, have those kind of relationship with.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you can be friends with them.
Of course.
Right. And
of course.
And some of them are actually pretty good people, kind and all that.
Most of them are really great people.
Right.
I mean, that's not the issue.
Right. It's just like they got trapped into that kind of situation.
Well, and you know what? Let's be honest. Most of us, if we come from hard backgrounds, have gotten trapped in a bad way of dealing with our problems.
Exactly.
And the difference is that one day I said, I don't want to be like this.
Mm-hmm.
And I decided I was going to change.
Right.
And that's why I'm happily married. I have 3 children.
Right.
Divorce is not a word that is ever discussed in my home.
No. Yeah.
This is not, I mean, there's a reason for it.
Yeah. Well, I think that's one of the lies that Satan kind of told is that, I mean, it's okay to divorce. I mean, it's better if you're divorced. There is
Yes.
you don't
I
have,
think the biggest lie is that my kids want me to be happy. No, they
no.
don't. They want to be loved by mom and dad.
They
And they want
want
to see mom and dad every day.
together. Yeah, exactly.
Look, I mean, really, they don't care whether or not you're happy. They really, really
Right.
don't.
I mean,
Now, I will say this: there is one caveat to all of that, and
Right.
that is if there's violence in the home,
exactly.
or extreme abuse. It could be emotional, physical, mental. If there's
Yeah.
anything going on, then
Yeah.
obviously I think that there's something needs to be done.
Right. And
But
yeah, because after all, we made a vow, right?
absolutely.
And then that vow is not to each other. The vow is in the presence of God.
Well, the number one thing I always think of when I think about marriage is that it's not really even about my marriage to my husband.
Right.
That's not the point of it.
Yeah.
The point of it is our marriage is a picture of Christ and his church to the
Amen.
world.
Right.
And if I'm trashing it and I'm trashing him and I'm saying, well, why can't you get your own lunch? Or I'm saying these things, I'm not being Christ.
No.
To his church.
No. Right. Exactly.
And that's my problem is that, I mean, I've even had married women say, because I went for years and years and years and years and years, you know, very religiously making my husband's lunches for him.
Mm.
And I remember someone said, well, can't your husband make his own lunches?
Of course.
I said, well,
why?
Well, of course he can. It's like, of course my husband can make his own lunch. I said, but the difference is that for my husband, this says I love you.
Amen. Exactly.
Why would I miss an opportunity to tell my husband I love him?
Right.
That he opens up that lunchbox and he sees sandwiches that were made by his wife and food that was prepared for him, specifically for him, so that he could have a good day.
Exactly.
And like when it was his birthday or other things were happening, I made sure I slipped in little notes and things like that. Why, as wives, have we listened to the lie that he could do it himself? Well, now you're just you're missing a complete opportunity to love on your husband in a completely different way.
Right. I mean, and so also that's one of the key points in the Bible is that to serve each other. Right.
Absolutely.
That's how we to serve. Unfortunately, the main culture is turned that upside down. It become like
you serve me.
Right. And if you serve someone, that become kind of oppressed somehow.
Well, I mean, if it's all about what you get, then it's really and truly, how is that any different than slavery?
Right.
Because that's really what slavery is. It doesn't matter what's yours, it's mine. And that's that mentality. And it's like, well, that's not what marriage is.
Right.
Marriage is not that. We are both equal in the sight of God.
And we serve each other.
Absolutely. We just simply have different roles.
Right.
I heard it told this way, and I believe it also operates the same with men and women, but it was regarding the Jew and the Gentile, because there can be somewhat of a rift between Christians, between the Messianic versus the Gentile Christian. And someone told me this, and I thought, that is actually a beautiful way of thinking about it. He said, God said, I'm going to have a giant banquet. I need workers. Okay, Jews, I want you to bring the tables and get the tables set up and get those ready. Gentiles, I need you to get all the chairs and get them set up at the table so we can have our banquet.
Right.
You can't have a banquet with no tables.
Right.
You can't have a banquet with no chairs.
Right.
You have to have both sets of people to get the job done so that we can all have an enjoyable banquet. Right. It's the exact same way in marriage. If we're not both someone's not bringing the chair and someone's not bringing the table, you're not going to have a dinner.
No.
And that's the problem, is that anymore, people are like, well, I wanted that job, or I don't see why I have to do this job, or, well, it's not about whether or not you have to. It's just like when you're at a party and says, can you pick up the chairs?
Right.
Say, well, I don't want to pick up the chairs.
Okay.
Okay. I mean, all right. I mean, but it creates an awkwardness.
But the thing is, they still expect to eat.
No, right. Exactly. And I'm like,
that's a problem, right?
Right. Well, and so that's just something that I always keep in mind when in my own personal marriage, but also just in general, is that, I don't want to miss a way to serve my husband. And if my husband tells me making him lunch every day makes him feel loved, I'm going to make his lunch every day.
Yeah, and
Now,
also because you also experience the joy of serving someone,
mhm.
and
Well, and it was
especially
perspective.
some, yeah,
And the only thing that changed was my perspective and my filter.
right.
Nothing else changed.
Mm-hmm.
The act of what I was doing, the need of what I was doing, the
Right,
necessity was nothing changed.
right.
The only thing that changed was my attitude towards it.
Exactly.
That's it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And and now, I mean, that's not to say that if, I mean, there were times I was just like, honey, I am so tired, or I am so slammed, or I've got so much on my plate right now.
Right,
And he'd just be like, don't worry about it, I'll get it.
right,
So it wasn't about, but at the time, but it was not about me serving him and me like loving on him. It was also a mutual respect of,
right,
yeah, I can see you've got a lot on your plate.
right,
I
right,
can do it. It's
right.
fine.
Yeah, I'll make my own lunch today.
Yeah. And I just don't understand why this causes tiffs in marriages. I don't get it.
I mean, like you say, it's really the perspective, how we're looking at it, right?
Yeah, and there's a lot of filters. It's just we
Yeah,
have to take a different, we have
yeah,
to filter our circumstances through God and not the other way around.
right. Because the world is, the world expect me get served.
Yeah.
Instead of, but the Christianity is about I serve somebody else.
Yes.
And that in for marriage, that change everything.
It does absolutely changes everything.
Right.
I mean, and it's that sacrificial, and of course, that's the sacrificial attitude that Christ has for us.
Right. Right.
I mean, what? I mean, it is a beautiful, precious thing when you see true sacrificial love.
Right.
But on the other hand, I will say this: it is important for us women to feel heard and truly hear that our husbands have heard us out and understand our perspective.
Oh yeah.
I mean, that makes it 10 times easier to say when the husband says, "This is my choice." It's a whole lot easier when you know you've had your say.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And you've been listened to, and there's been genuine thought put towards it. Every now and then I can see when I'm not being listened to, and I'm like,
yeah.
I'm agreeing to nothing until you listen.
Right. Yeah.
And yeah, I'm kind of a spitfire, so my poor husband.
Well, I mean, that's good because as men, we're kind of slow in understand what our wives need. Sometimes we need that to be kind of
concrete,
just like
clear.
Yeah, very concrete.
Exactly.
We don't take him that well.
No, you don't. That's okay. That's all right. I get it.
Right.
No, well, and that's the thing that I think there's a lot of things that since my parents have been through my mother's been divorced and was remarried, and my father he's now on his fourth wife. So and then of course I've had my marriage. I can see some of the things, and some of the things I think is that we have problems with each other, but it really is down to the fact that we're just different.
Yeah.
It's a male female difference.
Right.
And I think some people attribute, well, my husband does this. And I'm like, are you sure that's not just him being a man? I'm just saying.
I know.
And and I think there's sometimes we attribute too much to what's happened. Right. And that sometimes we need to step back and say, oh, he's just being a man. It's okay.
Yeah.
It's just like with our children, particularly our boys, when they get wild and hyper and,
right.
They can't sit still and all those fun, I just look at it and go, oh, he's being a BOY.
Yeah. Boys and girls are different.
Yeah, and they're entirely different, and it's okay. I mean, I have 2 boys and 1 girl, although my girl is, she's not girly. She's very... I remember one time I was somewhere and somebody said they saw my 2 boys and they saw my little girl, and they said, oh, God blessed you with a princess. And I go, well, I mean, do you mean Cinderella or do you mean like Xena, Princess Warrior? Because I got Princess Warrior. Which I love. I think I do not want to kill that spirit for anything, because that's going to do her well.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, my daughter was like that when she grew up.
Yeah. Well, I call her my nickname for her is Little Miss Iron Lady or Little Miss Margaret.
Right.
And the reason is that I envisioned that this was the way, what it was like to raise Margaret Thatcher.
Right. Right. Yeah.
And I admire her as a strong woman
Right.
who could command a room full of men.
Right.
And I'm like, all of those things that I admire is what I'm seeing in my daughter, but in a young child, it's infuriatingly frustrating.
Right. Right.
So I just always try to kind of remember, hey, she's little Miss Margaret. That's right. This is going to be, now we just need to channel it. We don't need to kill it. We don't need to punish it. We don't need to, we need to channel it. And that's the goal.
Right. And that's actually back to like our Christian belief that we are here to serve others.
Yes.
So as parents, we actually serve our children.
Actually, we disciple our children, not just serve, but disciple. I mean, which is different than serving.
Okay, understand. Yeah, yeah, definitely. I like your word there, but still, we when we say we serve someone, that means we put others' needs over ours.
Absolutely.
And that's how we kind of needs to treat our children, because after all, they are not ours.
No. Well, right? And that's actually
God's.
Something really interesting that I want to get into too with the homeschooling aspect, is that when we talk about, there's one question I ask everyone that really wants to quiz me on this stuff. And I said, you know what, I can tell what your philosophy of education is through one question and one question only.
Okay.
And at that point, I can tell whether or not I agree with you, or whether or not we're on the same side, or we're thinking alike.
Right.
And because I mean, it like really does cut the wheat from the chaff. And I'm like, okay, I know what I'm dealing with. And that question is, to whom did God give the authority to love, nurture, cherish, educate, and raise children?
Mm-hmm.
To who has that? Who has that authority?
Right.
And you know, it's shocking how many people tell me something else than what you and I would think. And I'm going, or I always hear, well, parents, but, and then there's always a but.
Oh.
There's always a but. And I'm going, So they don't really believe it.
Right. But the thing is, that's what the public school, the system has been telling parents consistently.
Yes.
Because if you look at the history of public schooling, it's always served the purpose of the government.
Correct.
Is because the government need to educate mass.
Well, I will say this. I would say an organized government-run education does that.
Right.
Not all education does that.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. But there's a difference.
Right. Yeah. But if you look at the public education, right, with the government-run schools, let's put it that way.
Yeah.
And no matter it's in the West or it's in the East, it doesn't matter it's in America or former Soviet Union or China. The reason the government wants to put money into it is to serve its own needs.
Absolutely. Well, that's what the government does.
Right. And
we have to remember that Christ did actually give, well, I should say Christ stated it, but God gave the role of civil government, the sword. We can't forget that. That was not given to the church.
Right.
That was given to
the government. Yeah.
Government. And so we have to remember that. So here's a little thought process I want to go through with you, because this gets down to the difference between some of the education options that we're seeing out there and some of the policies. So when I say that, the government's been given the sword, right? And what does the sword do? What is that purpose of the sword? What is, do you know what that purpose is?
Yep.
What is it?
Well, it's basically to punish evil. Punish evil doers. Yep.
Yeah. Punish or suppress. I even like to say suppress, because suppress, there's a lot of things. Government does a lot of things other than just with criminal stuff, right?
Right.
So I like suppress just because, it does a lot of suppression. It can suppress businesses. It can suppress criminals. It can suppress average everyday people. It suppresses us in our cars by how fast we can go, right?
Right.
So it suppresses. That's what government does. That's its role, is to suppress. And that's not always a bad thing. I want murderers, rapists, and thieves suppressed.
Right.
That's what I want. I think
Yeah.
we all can agree that's what we
Yeah.
want.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't have any problem with that.
Right.
But the problem is we have to remember that the government's nature is first and foremost to what? Suppress. So who runs the government?
Okay. The politicians.
Really, actually, not anymore. It's more the bureaucrats. So who runs government?
Okay. Why is that? Why
I can get into that later, but
okay. Maybe when we have another subject. But anyway,
okay,
but
yeah.
I think this is very important because this is a fundamental.
Yes.
Is
so
how
who runs
we
government?
right.
Who runs it?
The bureaucrats, as you said.
Okay, but who make up the bureaucrats?
People.
People, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So of people are the majority believers in Jesus Christ?
In the government?
No, just in general.
Oh, you mean real or
real people? Real people.
No. Real believers or just people
yes,
who
real
said
believers.
they are Christian?
No. Real born again.
Yeah.
Bible thumping. Jesus loving believers.
Yeah, it's a minority.
It's an extreme minority.
It's
okay,
minority.
I would agree. So if the minority, if those of us who are believers and who are truly children of God are a minority, who then runs our government if it's people?
Well,
is it Christians?
Most of them are not Christians.
Okay, so they're not Christians.
Right.
So if they're not Christians, who do they belong to?
Satan.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right, so we can agree on that. Satan, basically, the government's being run by Satan. I mean, not directly. That's silly. But I mean, you see what I'm saying? It belongs to that. The people belong to that.
But isn't that what Thomas Paine said? Government is necessary evil.
It is.
That's what
and so,
the founders understood.
These people are not Christians.
Right.
And so that means the things that we find wrong, they're going to say is okay.
Oh, yeah.
And the things that we say are wrong, they're going to say are right.
Yeah.
So we have to understand that.
Right.
And then if you go and say, oh, but I can take that money from the government and bring it into my Christian homeschool and it will not affect us. You're literally asking the government to go against this very nature that God gave it.
Right.
Yeah. It defies logic. You can't, you cannot be a Christian and also be taking money from people who are ruled by someone else.
Well, but can
you
they
can't serve two masters?
Right. But can they make the argument that it's not money that government gave to me, it's my money that government take less of it?
Okay. Well, I say the government should take less of it. I absolutely believe that.
Right.
I have no problem with that argument. I do have a problem with the argument that you pay your taxes and it's still your money. No, it's not.
Yeah, once you pay it.
No, it's not your money. Once they hit those government coffers, it now becomes government money, and you only control it insofar as you vote on the individual who then goes and represents you on how to spend that money. That's the only control you have over it. Yeah. You do not have control over what kind of education that it gets to pay for. You don't get to control the teachers that it hires. Right. You don't get to control the type of school that you want to go to. You don't get to control your vaccine schedules. You don't get to control any of that. Mm-hmm. And that's what a lot of things, and something that I've been wanting to work on for a long time. And I was planning on getting a lot farther on it this spring, this fall. I was supposed to go to a parents' rights conference, and I was so excited, but I ended up having COVID and I couldn't go.
Yeah, right.
So, but one of the things I'm really wanting to look at is when you send your kids to school, what rights do you willingly give up? That nobody talks about.
Right.
One of the things is you lose control of your children's data. It's no longer in your control.
Right.
The school owns it, and they will do with it as they see fit. Mm-hmm. You no longer control your vaccine schedule. Mm-hmm. The school now controls it. You no longer, so there's things that you no longer control. Right. And we never talk about those things.
Right.
It's, parents have always assumed that their rights are intact, even if they take their kid to school. The problem is they aren't.
Right. Well, I think to me, the fundamental, thing is that the government-run schools was never designed to serve the parents or the students. It's designed
governments never serve others.
Right. It's designed to serve the government. So I think that's something as parents we need to realize that.
Yeah.
We
Well, and
realize
that's the
that,
thing, is that too many parents are far too trusting of
right.
their schools and of their government. And the thing is that you don't realize, I mean, and it's not to say that there aren't good people in that government. I was in it.
Mm-hmm.
I had the best of intentions.
Right.
But the reality is that the forces that are in motion are far bigger than any one good person can
Right.
possibly
Right.
withstand.
Yeah, I think
And it's
that's
not that it's not that you ever do anything bad,
right.
but you're such a small cog, you
Right.
can't change anything.
Well, like, to me, that's where we get back to Thomas Paine, right?
Yeah.
I mean, Thomas Paine said the government is a necessary evil.
It is.
I mean, so it's
It
not
is.
good. It's necessary evil. So anyone in there is really part of that. It's very hard to change it. And so the founder's solution is to limit it.
Yes. Well, and it's very interesting. I've just gotten done teaching a few classes in my kids' American history class.
Right.
And one of the things that we talked about was oh golly, I just lost my train of thought.
Okay, American history. And are you talking about the government or?
Yes, it was. Well, I got it. So in the beginning, the founders were not worried about people's rights or privileges. They didn't. That wasn't of concern to them.
Mm-hmm.
What they were most concerned about was controlling power.
Mm-hmm.
And the problem is now we are so focused on rights that we've completely lost sight of the fact that we are putting power in too few people's hands.
Right.
And there's not enough push me, pull you.
Right.
So a lot of times they like to say, well, you can't, whenever the Supreme Court says something, then the government has to follow and you have to do it. Actually, that's not true. A lot of lawyers like to quote Marbury versus Madison, which was a court case where Jefferson, before he left, he appointed Marbury as, I think, treasurer or someone like that.
Okay.
And because he didn't like Madison's thoughts and philosophies.
Mm-hmm.
So what he ended up doing was doing a late night appointment.
Mm-hmm.
And then Madison got in there and said, I don't like you. I don't want you in there. Get out.
Mm-hmm.
And so Marbury took him to court.
Oh.
And it went to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court said, Madison, he was duly in office. If all the rules were followed, you need to put him back in office. And you know what Madison said? Stick it in your ear. He ain't coming back. And so that's what nobody talks about, what actually happened afterwards. They only talk about the court case.
Oh, okay.
They only talk about the fact that Madison lost.
So
but the problem is that the Supreme Court has zero enforcement mechanisms.
Oh, okay.
They planned it that way.
Okay.
So Madison knew, okay, you ruled that. That's nice.
So what? Okay.
Exactly. What are you going to do? Make me? That's essentially what Madison said. Okay. And Marbury didn't come back.
Okay.
So that's something that we need to start thinking about again. We need to start thinking about the fact that just because the Supreme Court says it doesn't mean it has to be.
Right.
And honestly, I'd say a lot of the pushback actually needs to come from the legislative branch, because our executive branch has gotten far too. So let's go back to what you were talking about with the bureaucrats. Why do the bureaucrats run the country? Well, because they don't change.
Right.
Just because a new guy comes in at the top doesn't mean that they lose their job.
No,
the top echelon does. That's it. Everybody below is still the same people.
Right. Well, but
first and foremost, they want to make sure that their job is secure.
Right.
And so they do things to make sure that their jobs are viewed as necessary.
Necessary. Yep.
And so they actually run everything, not really the politicians.
Right.
So I mean, they can rearrange the deck chairs.
Yeah.
But that's really all politicians get to do.
Right.
The bureaucrats are really the ones who do everything.
Yeah. I mean, that is just throughout human history, right? It's not just something new. Throughout history, it's always the bureaucrats.
Well, you go through. I mean, you need to go through Hegel and Kant and some of those others, and you start understanding what's going on, because it's an idea. So you have Hegelian theory that says that we only know we only know what we know, but there's more to know. And so knowledge is constantly changing. So there is no constant knowledge.
Okay.
And of course, that leads us to our relativism, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, well, because there's no, knowledge isn't stationary, neither is anything else. My reality is not your reality, because our knowledge is constantly changing.
And then the morality become relative.
Correct. And so there's that. And then, of course, because knowledge is always changing, you need to have a stabilizing influence in the government. We now call them bureaucrats.
Oh, okay.
See?
Well, even if you look at the Chinese history, you're right. I mean, Chinese has been.
I don't know it as well as you do, but
dynasties, right?
Yes.
And so you have the emperor. Suppose the emperor, well, he has a lot to write. He can kill people, all that. But in order for the policy to go through to get to govern the country, it is the bureaucrats who they have the say. They can either do it or not do it, or just delay it, right? Yeah, I mean that's what we see. Even when Trump was the president, there's a lot of things he just couldn't get it done because the bureaucrats.
I mean, I remember, well, and here's just my own little world.
Right.
I remember working for congressmen, and people would want to meet with him, which is fine. But as staff, we don't let our congressmen meet with people alone. That's just foolishness for a lot of reasons.
Okay.
And because we don't want somebody saying, well, the congressman promised me X, and there was no one there to say, well, no, I didn't, or yes, I did.
Gotcha.
So we as staff, we're expected to be in these meetings and that sort of thing to make just to be a second set of ears.
That's
so
good.
That we
That's
can
good practice.
Say what's happening. And I can't begin to tell you how many times people who were trying to meet with a congressman would actually close the door in my face because they didn't want me there.
Oh, wow.
What they didn't understand is anything that they got the congressman to agree to, guess who had to do it?
You had to do it. Right. They need to be nice to you.
That was a mistake.
Right, that was a mistake. Well, I mean,
and I was never vindictive about it, but at the same time, if it went to the bottom of the pile, it went to the bottom of the pile.
Yeah, what
I
can
get to it.
Right. Well, actually, this is one of the first lessons I learned when I started working in the real world. Okay, I mean, I was on university campus for 12 years. I was kind of, master and PhDs and all of that. So so I went to the real world. The first thing I learned is that be nice, be especially nice to the secretaries.
Well, I'm always nice to. So when I worked in Congress, I was even nice to the guy that came around and picked up trash. I was nice to the guy that delivered our mail every day. Actually, and many people don't know this, but in Congress, we get mail delivered 3 times a day.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
Yeah. So 3 times a day you get mail. And I was always, hey, how's your kids? Are you guys going on vacation? And always.
Right.
When I would go down to the cafeteria to buy food, I always knew who all the workers were, and I always talked to them, and I always found out how their lives were. Right. And you know what? I got treated great.
Right. Exactly.
And if they had a little extra something or whatever, or they got something wrong, or they're just like, that's okay, baby. You just go ahead and take that.
Right. Yeah.
I was like, well, I'll pay for it. They're like, no, honey, it's okay. You just go ahead and take it. I mean, because they looked out for me, because they knew.
Right.
They knew that, I genuinely cared about who they were.
Right. You respect them, so they
absolutely. And the guys that came to pick up the trash, I always made sure because they would always come late, and so a lot of times I would be working late too.
Okay.
And so that's why, but there's of course, I'm a Hoosier. I was raised a Hoosier.
Right.
And my family was always a smile is free to give. It doesn't cost anything to be nice.
No.
It never costs anything to be nice. So be nice.
Yeah.
And that's always been my philosophy. I should be nice always.
and you actually, that in a way, that's a good investment, because
absolutely.
Absolutely. Right. Because
if I see my kids not being nice, they know what comes next. Like, I don't tolerate it.
Right. Well, that I think to the young people, to our kids, they need to learn that. First of all, treat people. Well, this is Bible, right? Bible lessons. You treat people like you would like to be treated, and treat people well. And that's one thing. Everybody treat well. And the second thing to learn is sometimes you have to fight.
Yeah.
And you have to get nasty about it.
Well, I often go around remembering the verse about I was not created with a spirit of timidity.
Right.
And that's the thing that I have to keep reminding myself while I do this work, because it's not easy to do this work.
No.
It's very hard. It's exhausting. You never know when something's going to happen, and you literally have to drop everything in your life to deal with it.
Right.
And so that's really hard. I mean, it's really hard to live that way for years.
Yeah.
It's not bad. It's actually fun and exciting to live like that for a little while. But, you know, I'm now at the point where I'm like, this is getting a little harder. I don't really like this quite as much. But the thing is I also can't replace the experience that I have and the knowledge that I have.
Right.
And so, and that's where I now cling to a lot to Esther. You know, I have to know that God gave me these experiences for a reason. And if I turn my back on what God has given me, I can't be as useful to his kingdom as if I just obey.
Right.
And so I've always, even in my political career, I've always just said, Lord, move me where you want me.
Yeah.
And I've just let him lead.
Exactly.
And it's always worked out well that way.
Right.
It doesn't mean I didn't get some hard jobs where I really didn't like being there.
Right.
But they always, God always used that later.
Right.
And everything. I mean, even like I joke. Well, I don't even joke. It's because it's true. I tell people that God sent me to college to go home. He didn't send me to a college to get a career. He gave me, I already had a career before I even went to college, apparently. I didn't know it at the time.
Okay.
But apparently I already had a career. But what he ended up doing is sending me to college. I got my degree in speech and hearing sciences, which included language acquisition and disorders. Little did I know that those beautiful little babies that I was having were dyslexic.
Are they all dyslexic?
2 of the 3.
Okay.
2 of my 3 are. Mm-hmm.
Two boys?
My 2 boys.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. My 2 boys are both dyslexic. And so little did I know that God was actually preparing me for.
Right.
He was not preparing me for the world. He was preparing me for my home.
Yeah.
And so initially I wasn't sure what to do, but initially, as I started pulling through all the information, I thought, wait, I know this stuff.
Right. You.
Like, wait.
Right.
And, you know, and as it would happen, I had enough wherewithal that I didn't get rid of all my college textbooks. So I actually have a lot of my college textbooks still. And actually just today I was doing, the reason I was late getting on with you is that I was lesson planning. And, you know, I have a case where there's a lot of articulation issues too with the sounds. So I actually went and was like, oh, I had that book from college. And so I went and grabbed it off the shelf and I was able to look through. Oh yeah. Okay. I remember what I'm doing now. Okay. That's great. And so it ended up being perfect for me.
That's amazing. That's amazing.
Exactly. And I say, you know, so whenever someone says, well, then is it really, you know, what's the point in sending a woman to college if you're going to go and be a mom?
Exactly why he said go to college to be a mom.
Why?
Right.
This is why.
Right.
You know, so now I'm not only working with my own children who are dyslexic, but now I'm also bringing other parents and helping them. And my approach is particularly with homeschool families. There's some, I actually do have a public school student and we do it the traditional way.
Okay.
But with my homeschool families, my idea is not that I want to be the tutor. I know everything. I'm the expert. That's not it.
Right.
I want to model for you how I do it.
Okay. So
I want you to see my lesson plans. I want you to learn my lesson plans because I want to empower you, the parent, that you can do this too.
Right.
Because here's the other thing: dyslexia is hereditary.
Okay.
That means there's probably other kids in that family who have the exact same condition.
Right.
And so what I'm teaching that one child is going to help the whole family.
Right. Yeah, this is something I think for dyslexia is a lot of people had it. You just don't know.
I didn't know it until I.
Right.
Yeah, I had no idea.
Yeah,
I just remember learning to read was hard, and eventually I figured it out. And I went to college, and now I look at my college transcript, which I always was not overly proud of. But now I look at it and I'm like, well, I did that as a dyslexic with zero
Right.
any help, none whatsoever. I had no accommodations, no
Well,
nothing.
like in my case, I didn't know until just recently. It just makes sense because when I was young, I just don't understand it. Right? It means something I have to overcome.
Yes.
Put that way, and I learned how to deal with it.
Yes. You learned coping mechanisms.
And so I didn't even know the word. I don't even know that such thing actually existed.
Yeah.
But there's one thing I found because I become an engineer and I work at the in the industry for like 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
Many engineers have dyslexia.
Yes.
And
yes, they do.
some
Actually,
some
MIT actually calls it the MIT disease.
Yeah. Well, I personally know some engineers, I mean, super smart engineers,
Believe it.
serious dyslexia,
I believe it.
serious. I mean, talking about like they literally say words out of order.
Yeah, I believe it.
And they have to put the effort to make that make sense.
Yes.
But here's one thing about people with dyslexia, the good side of it, and that's why a lot of engineers had it, is for people with dyslexia, they are very good at visualize 3D objects.
Yep.
Because to them, the order does not matter.
They also are out of the box thinkers.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, that's one thing I found that I'm very, very good at is I have lots of things. I have a broad base of knowledge over a lot of different things. And so what's really interesting is that my knowledge of public policy is actually what drew me to doing dyslexia tutoring, because I know what the numbers look like in our public schools and what reading scores look like.
Right.
I know what that is, and it's terrible. It is a scourge on this generation.
I heard it's about 20%. Is that true?
Well, but that's the number with dyslexia, but we have 60% of kids not reading at grade level.
Yeah.
It's far bigger than just dyslexia.
Right.
It's just that dyslexics are really out of luck. I mean, they're just really out of luck.
But so what do you see? What is the cause of that problem? Why like 60% couldn't even read to the grade level?
Well, what that means is when you go to the prisons, 80% of prison inmates have issues with reading, and they're not all dyslexic, but they didn't learn to read sufficiently. Right,
but what do you think is the cause or causes?
Oh, causes. I thought you said costs.
Oh yeah, not cost, causes. Yeah.
Okay, sorry. Okay. It's okay. The causes of dyslexia?
Not dyslexia, like 60% of
okay,
students.
well, so essentially, it's called the reading wars. Did you have Cheryl Clemens on?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Well, it's something out there called the reading wars, and you have the proponents of balanced literacy and you have the proponents of structured literacy. And right now, what's in schools today is balanced literacy, and it's essentially read books, exposure, little bit of grammar, exposure, little bit of phonics, exposure. And so these kids who need more explicit instruction aren't getting it.
Oh, okay.
And the other thing that I've noticed with what I've seen come home from public schools, just in general, is it goes way too fast.
Right.
They're way too fast for these kids. It's just too fast. And the other thing is there's almost no rhyme or reason. So like they'll have all the different ways to spell the long A, but they will not give them any reason why it's spelled differently in the different contexts.
Right.
And so one of the things that we do, yes, we teach the kids all the different ways to spell long A, but we do it over a much longer period of time. And we help them analyze when it's likely to occur.
Right.
So like the long A sound, we have a little jingle that gives people the proper order of when words are likely to be spelled with the long A that way. So it's vacation came on a rainy day, so 8 reindeer wouldn't obey. And that means that EY is the least frequent way of spelling the long A sound.
Oh, wow.
But we have to include it because it is a possibility.
I see.
But the most common is vacation. So it's the just the A,
Right.
just the A.
Okay.
But then the second most common is the A consonant E. Then the next common is
okay.
And so we do it by how frequent it is in the English language.
Right. So you basically
so then the kids can make, you know, intelligent decisions about how to
spell.
So
is that called the phonics teaching?
Okay, phonics is when you take the sounds of our language and you put it to a grapheme or a letter. Okay. That's phonics.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So, but this methodology that we use is actually called Orton-Gillingham. And so that's what we use. And actually what most parents don't know about is there's before phonics, there's an even more important stage of literacy that most parents don't know nothing about. Oh. Most teachers don't teach. So these and about 40% of kids actually need it explicitly instructed in it. Oh. But most parents don't know about it. And it's called phonological awareness. And that is just working with the sounds that you hear in our language, no letters. You can have pictures, so you can, and it's not about how words are spelled, it's how they sound. And I actually liken it to Legos. I actually have those Duplos, Duplos or Mega Blocks. I think they're Mega Blocks, but to work with the kids, because I actually call phonological awareness the Legos of language. Oh, okay. So the Legos, you need to know how you can take them apart, pick a different piece and put that in place. And then, I can take this off and I can make an entirely different thing. And that is what we have to do with phonological awareness, but it's only with their ears. Oh, okay. Gotcha. And in their brain. It's nowhere else. There's no letters or anything. And the reason why parents are told read to your young children is because they're hoping that children will pick up phonological awareness organically through that reading. Okay. But like my kids, two of my three are dyslexic. They're not going to pick it up that way. And there's another 20% of kids that they're not necessarily dyslexic, but they just didn't pick it up. Right. They need that explicit instruction. And once they get it, they do great. But I mean, well,
so basically you are saying like we have how many years of research? I mean, let's say about 100 years of research in education, because we have in teachers college for more than 100 years. Yeah. So after this many years, I mean, we have like PhDs and graduate schools in all the universities that they are supposed to understand that, right? Research on that.
Well, so hang on.
Okay.
So what happened with education is there was a point in time where you got into let's see, it'd be like the 30s. Yeah, I think it's about the 30s, 40s, where psychology took a great big huge, like everybody was into it, right? Okay. And and everybody thought that was the new wave of science, is all this psychology. And of course, B.F. Skinner, who was the famous behaviorist, was dean, was head of the psychology department down at IU Bloomington. Okay. So at that point, a lot of education started heading down the psychological research route. Okay, so they started following psychology. Well, there's also something to be said for actual science, like neurobiology and you know, the probes on your head. And so the problem is that what happened is education research started going the psychological route, and then interestingly enough, speech and hearing sciences, we tend to go more towards the science part. So not as much as the psychology, but we're more towards the science. Right. And so we're interested in what's happening in the brain, what parts of the brain are lighting up when various things are happening, and what controls what. And and so we had to give a little more scientific route to it. Well, more traditionally scientific. Right. Medical, I should say medical. Okay. Medical route. Whereas the education world went more the psychology route. Huh. That's interesting. That's what's happened. Okay. So they kind of just went like this. Okay. And they've never come back together again. I see. So basically, I mean, after this many years of research, we just made things worse. Meaning education, in terms of teaching kids how to read. At least the reality is that, right? We got more people. I mean, let's go we got more people. I mean, cannot read now. Right. Well, but let's go back to what God intended. What did God intend? did he intend for us to stick all of our kids in a box
No.
and teach them all the exact same way?
No.
No. What did he intend? Read your Bible.
Right.
When you walk along the road, when you lie by the way, when
Right.
you
Yeah, exactly. As parents, yeah.
that was what God intended. That's
Okay.
what children need. What children need is not going to a big box school where there's one teacher and 30 kids. Well, who's socializing who?
Mm-hmm.
The children are learning how to socialize from other children.
Right.
Well, no wonder you're getting bad behavior.
Yeah, exactly.
They're children.
Yeah, this is something like when I was teaching at a Christian school, I was alarmed by that. Is that I asked my senior student, I said, if there is something very important, I mean, we're talking about life-changing importance, that something you have a decision to make, who'd you talk to? Most of them said, talk to their peers, their best friend.
Yeah.
I think only one student said, I'm going to talk to my mom.
Yeah. Well,
that, to me is scary.
Well, and that's the outworkings of this methodology.
Right.
And it's not, and and the thing is that it's only been around for 100 years. Prior to that, homeschooling was the form of education.
Right.
I mean, there really wasn't anything else unless you were rich.
Yeah.
Or if you were somehow instituted in like an abbey or a monastery. There really wasn't any way for a poor person to, and really up until Gutenberg, or really even, let me think, when was it? Yeah, it was Gutenberg. I mean, you couldn't even get written things really until Gutenberg came along, and even that was sparing. And we didn't even have the idea of universal education until mid 20th century.
But the idea actually is older than that. It's the 17th century. Yeah.
And so the problem is that,
sorry, not 17th, it's the 19th century. Yeah.
Yeah. And so
that's the idea. They started about, public education, especially the state-run, government-run schools.
Well, I heard this, I can't even remember the rabbi's name, but he was a rabbi. And he was talking about the Tower of Babel. And I never heard it explained this way. And I thought, oh my goodness, yeah. Yeah, oh my gosh. And they said what was sinful, that is that when the Bible is describing the Tower of Babel, there's a lot of imagery that's going on.
Right.
And what's happening is, the difference is that the tower itself is made of brick. How do you make brick?
You have to bake
Mud,
it.
straw,
and bake
water.
it.
Then you stick it in a form, you mash it into a form, and it has to take that shape.
Right.
And then what do you do with it?
You bake it.
You dry it out and you stress it under the sun, the hot day sun. That's how a brick is made.
Right.
And it's uniforms, which is why it's great to work with when you're trying to build and that sort of thing. What makes it lovely to work with when you're doing a systematic thing.
Right.
But the problem is that I guess from what this rabbi was saying is that in the Bible, stones represent humanity the way God created them.
Okay.
And bricks represent humanity when they're under what do I want to say? Authority, under
Okay.
under rule.
So there is conformity to it. You have to. Everybody has to fit in.
Exactly.
And that's basically what the government-run schools are doing.
Yes. And so I heard that and I was like, oh my gosh, that's exactly what's going on with the public schools today.
Right.
The public schools today is everyone is expected to conform into the mold. If you don't conform in the mold, or you can't tolerate the bright sun all day long, you're defective.
Right.
And instead, if you contrast with that with homeschooling, you're not looked at as defective, you're looked at as beautiful.
Right. Well, like
and perfectly capable of building a wall. I mean, if you go over into Europe, everyone builds walls with bricks, or not with bricks, but with stone, individual, unique stone. My parents, back when I was in college, they built a house and they put limestone all over their house, the front of the house, beautiful. And they had an amazing mason who would actually, he would chip it off just to be just right. But he would, before he would put that stone up on the house, he would look at it from every single angle and he would find the most beautiful angle. And
Ah.
that's what he would make face out. If he saw that it had a fossil in it, he made sure the fossil was sticking out. If he's so
I love that. I love that
that is what
imagery.
homeschooling is.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, we need to knock off a few edges that don't quite fit or a few bumps. Yes, that's true. You do have to do that. Yes.
Right.
But what our goal is to take that beautiful fossil or that beautiful shade or that amazing ribbon that's going through that stone and make it shine.
Exactly.
That's what homeschooling is.
Yeah.
And that is something that a bricklayer, a brickmaker is never going to get.
No. And then that is the beauty of it, because each person is different.
The problem is that the government's now trying to say, hey, we want what the stones have.
Right.
But you can't make stones that way.
No. Well, actually, it kind of reminds me, like, in the Old Testament, and when Bible tell like Abraham and the other people to build an altar, he made that very clear that you cannot do anything to the stone.
Right.
You cannot use any tools. You have to take what it is and then put together the altar. So that actually.
And that's what I see homeschooling as, is that we're taking what God has given us and we're trying to accent the positive.
Right.
And what schools do, however, though, is if that's not your natural positive, you're mocked for it, you're teased for it, you're not given opportunities for it, you're taken out of recess for it. You're taken out of your favorite subjects so that you can work more on the stuff that you don't do well. And I get why teachers do that. Look, my husband's a teacher, so I am sympathetic and I understand. And that's also not to say that I'm anti-public school.
No.
I want to say that too. I'm not anti-public school.
Me neither.
There's kids who need it.
Yeah, but the thing is, we have to understand is that the reason they have this system is because of the economy. They want to produce as many students as possible with the constraint that, you're always constrained with money. So, the ideal education should be that each kids have several teachers, right? That would be the ideal case. If you have education, we kind of picture the private education, right? If you have a rich parent, then you can hire, you still have responsibility. You hire different tutors to teach your kid.
Yes.
Right? That's the ideal. But we cannot do that in a mass scale because the government just don't have the kind of money. So government run school is basically, in a way, is an industry.
Yes.
So you have to make as many products as possible. So that way, everything has to be standardized.
Yes.
So that's the problem with it, because the
problem is our children aren't standard.
Exactly.
They don't come standard. They don't. It's not a factory.
Well, that's where you see a lot of successful people. Many of them actually were not good in schools.
Yes.
Many of them actually was considered defects, and especially if you have, I call it entrepreneur spirit. They will knock out from you.
Well, the thing I saw when my kids were little, they would put two and two things together. Like there was a creative thought that they had.
Right.
And instead of my saying, oh, well, we're not doing that right now.
Right.
That's not what we're talking about in class right now.
Right.
Instead, I could take it this time and say, really, what else do you think about that?
Mm-hmm.
And, I remember one time my son, I was making lunch in the kitchen and he was just over on the kitchen table. And we have placemats on our table. We always have, and we still do. So, because we love maps in our family, and so we're always, that's what we do.
Right. That's good. My wife loves maps too.
So we have maps as our placemats. Right. And he was looking at the placemat and he could say, and we were in a program where we learned a timeline. Mm-hmm. And he had never, other than in this timeline, he had never heard the name Napoleon before.
Huh.
I'm like, okay. So he was at the time, he was fascinated by the largest landmass in the world.
Okay.
That's a country, which is
Right.
USSR. Well, is now Russia.
Right.
And he said, Mommy, is this where Napoleon's from? And he points to Russia. And I said, no, that's not Russia. I said, do you remember? I said, that's Russia. Do you remember where Napoleon's from? He said, I said, well, let's remember our memory work on that. Napoleon crowned emperor of, he's like, oh, France. I go, yes.
Mm.
He goes, well, where's that, Mommy? And I said, well, that's in Europe. And he says, and I said, he goes, well, Europe's over here, right, Mommy? And I said, yes, it is. And I said, well, you should see a green country that starts with an F. Do you see that? He's like, yeah, it's right here. And I said, yes. He said, oh, did Napoleon ever conquer Russia? We spent the rest of the afternoon
Right.
talking about the Napoleonic Wars.
Right.
Because I just allowed him to ask questions and he started making connections.
Right.
And he made that connection all on his own.
Right.
But in school, he would have been told, okay, we're done with finding
Right.
find
Move
Italy.
Move
And
on.
instead, I let him talk a little bit more, and I let him think a little bit more,
Yeah.
and I let him. And then, but then he intuitively knew that something must have happened between France and Russia.
Right.
And he was right.
Okay. What was he upset that Napoleon was defeated?
Well,
he
actually,
upset?
we got into discussion of the winter and supply
Right.
chain problems. I mean,
Yeah.
it's like, and I think he was like 6 or 7 at the time. I mean, he was not old.
Yeah.
But I mean, but those are the kind of opportunities that I have that I know in school would have been squashed.
Right. And that's what school does. I mean, and also you think about what the school does is it's unnatural.
It is, because what do children naturally need? Parents.
Right. Well, like beyond that, like say, as a learning process, we learn based on our interest.
Yes.
If we are interested in something, we spend the whole day of doing it, and that's most effective.
Mm-hmm.
Like I remember when I was getting interested in math, I spent like a couple of weeks, and like I went through the whole year.
Mm-hmm.
Because I was just like, I was fascinated by that.
Better you than me.
That's what I do for 2 weeks.
Well, that's okay. I got you on the dyslexia front, so that's all good. I can help you there.
Right. But anyway, you see, right? That's a natural for
it
kids.
Is. Well, and the other thing that's unnatural is that when a child is trying to learn something that's difficult for them, is having no touch, affection, or fun.
Right.
That's also very unnatural.
Yeah.
I have a theory in my homeschool that nothing is worth learning through tears.
Right.
Nothing.
No.
Nothing.
No.
So if my child is breaking down over something, that's because there's some fundamental skill that was further down the chain that didn't get filled.
Right.
So we need to back off right this second.
Exactly.
And then go back through. And when they finally get to it, that's when you get the hugs. That's when you get my sons, of course, with the dyslexia, writing, learning to compose and that sort of thing was a real problem. So one of the things I did, I actually used the band Queen in helping him learn to yes, I did. Because he had a hard time making the sentences. And so each time he would get a sentence written, I would break out, another one bites the dust. Dun, dun, dun,
okay.
Dun, 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 dun. So we'd have a little party that he got a sentence done.
Okay.
And so we would go through the whole paper that way. And then when we finally got the whole paper done and it was edited and we had all our extra pretty stuff in there and it was all great, we then would play We Are the Champions.
Oh, wow.
We are the champions.
I love it. Well,
and when he would have something that was really hard for him and he was starting to have it, like he would I call it a freak out.
Mm-hmm.
He would freak out. So when he would do that, I would then play La Chic had an old song called Freak Out. So I would play that. Whenever he would freak out and like mental meltdown, all of that, I would just start. I'm like, "This is fine. We can freak out. It's all right." And we would have a little dance party.
Okay.
To freak out. And what would happen is that now all of a sudden, all that tension and all that frustration and all that, we were able to move on and move out of it.
Right.
And so it was a redirection. technique.
Well, and also you send the message, which is important, is that when you freak out, when you run into some roadblocks, you are not the failure.
Right. Absolutely. It's
But
okay.
but the school will make you feel like that.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
They absolutely will. And, you know, I'm not against public schools. I don't think it's right for my children for a lot of reasons.
Right.
But at this point, when it comes to my kids and dyslexia, there's no way I can let my
Right,
child
right,
go
right.
to a public school.
Yeah.
They're just not set up for them.
Right.
And
No,
children's
no.
brains who think differently, because dyslexic brains are literally wired differently.
Right.
And those
Exactly.
kids who have brains who are literally wired differently do not function well in school.
Right.
They
Yeah.
just don't.
They just don't. They need the individual attention. Yeah.
They really do, because
Right.
their brains are wired uniquely.
Right.
They're not wired like everyone else's.
Yeah.
And even within families, they're wired uniquely.
Right. Definitely.
So,
yeah. It's
I mean,
I like the imagery, the example you give, like your parents building a house, and the who the guy
Mason.
who is the mason
Yeah.
who is building it, he's actually looking at trying to find the best side of that stone and using it that way. I mean, sometimes you have to do some work, right? Smooth it out and chip something, which that is what education is about.
But that's also the Christian life.
Right. Yeah.
God, you know, we are called as Christians to chip some of our sinful ways away from us, apart from us.
Right.
And so, and if you're not doing that, you're not living the life Christ wants you to.
I love that.
And so,
yeah.
And it's the exact same thing in our academic life.
Right.
Yes, there's going to be some rough patches, and we're going to have to smooth things over.
Right.
But that doesn't mean you can't overcome them.
Exactly.
You know, Christ has called us to overcome our sins through his son.
Yeah.
And, you know, but still, we still have, just because Jesus died for our sins doesn't mean we can just go around sinning.
No.
We still have to divest ourselves of those sin.
Right.
And it's the same thing with these kids. You know, just because they failed at one thing doesn't mean they're a failure.
Right. No.
And the thing is that, you know, we say it all the time with our kids. It's like, okay, so try it again.
Yeah.
You know, we say, well, what does that mean? Okay, so you didn't get it this time. What does that mean? And our kids now know, I need to practice more. Exactly.
Right.
It just means you need to practice more. It doesn't mean it doesn't mean you'll never get it. It just means you don't have it right now.
Yeah. That means
there's lots of things I don't have.
Right. And sometimes, like, you know, you pick a battle, right?
Yeah.
And nobody enjoys like defeated all the time.
No. Well, and that's the thing I see in these kids, is that they're so defeated.
Right. They give up.
I
mean, I see that. Instead, well, I mean, they just stop learning.
They do. They do. It's almost like you learned helplessness.
Right.
That I start seeing in these kids. And that is just heartbreaking to me. And that's why the public school kid I work with, just this last year, I've seen so much growth in him.
Right.
He started at like a kindergarten level reading.
Oh, wow.
And I was able in 18 months to get him to pass the iRead.
Oh, which grade?
That's the end of third grade.
That's very good. Yeah.
So we were in 18 months, we were able to make that kind of progress.
Right.
And that doesn't mean we're still not working on it. We are.
Oh, yeah. You definitely work on that. Yeah.
We're still progressing, but at the same token, and then this last time that I was working with him, I was like, oh my goodness, he has really just taken off. And and it's been fantastic. And I hate to think what kind of future would have
if they
in front of him if I hadn't done it.
Exactly.
And there's so many kids that my mom is also an Orton Gillingham tutor as well. And so between the two of us, we've seen quite a lot. And actually, it's been interesting. I'm actually working more with teenagers right now.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And I'm really enjoying the teenagers, because you can't do some of the things you can.
Oh, wow. So,
like, you know, I like being sarcastic and silly and that kind of things, and you just really can't do that with the little ones.
No. So if anyone needs help, like either their children have dyslexia or they have dyslexia themselves, they can come to you, right?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I have to say that my slate is full, but I always say that, you know, I'll give the first 30 minutes free to anybody who wants to talk to me.
Right.
After that, I do charge because
Of
my,
course.
my time is important.
Right.
And I have to limit what I do because I'm
Right.
one person.
Right.
And of course, as I told you, I'm still recovering from COVID. I'm not 100% yet.
Wow.
So and that's probably going to be, I'm going to give myself until, the end of the year.
Okay.
I'm going to kind of,
Then we can go
yeah, just kind of,
back. Yeah.
but I have lots of little like blurbs that I have already pre-written out
Okay.
because I got tired of typing it all the time. So
Right.
I just have little things that are standard. I can say, oh, have you looked at this, or have you read this,
Right.
or here's some recommendations for you. And
Yeah.
I can do that really easily. I had one family, that's really all they needed. They just needed to
Right.
hear, have you looked at this curriculum? Have you thought about this? And like, oh yeah, okay. And so that's really all they needed. They didn't
Okay.
need an actual like, and the
No.
other thing
No.
I tell parents, and this goes for public school parents, private school parents, charter school parents, homeschool parents, if your kid needs intervention with dyslexia, you can do it.
Right.
You
Right.
don't have to hire a tutor. You don't have to wait for your school to get their
Right.
act together to do it. You can do it. You can. There are homeschool curriculums that are created for families to do in their home. And even if you can't afford to do a whole homeschool program, I understand that. I completely understand
Right.
that.
Right.
But you can take 20 minutes to 2 hours a week, or I should say 2 hours a week, broken up over 2 different nights. You can take that time and intervene for your child yourself.
Right.
You don't have to wait.
Right. No.
And
No.
it's buying the curriculum is cheaper than getting a tutor. It's cheaper than,
Right.
it's not necessarily cheaper than waiting for your school, but honestly, by the time you have to fight them, your cost is in blood, sweat, and tears.
Right. I think yeah, basically just give up the idea that the school can help you. You are
in the
own.
dyslexia area, yes,
Yeah,
that's
you're on
really
your
pretty much the
own.
case.
You go
are
find
on
the
your
help.
own.
Yeah, you go find the
pretty
help.
much.
Yeah.
But that's just it. You're not on your own.
Right.
So those of us who've been homeschool parents for many, many years, you really need to get to be friends with us because
Right.
we don't hate homeschooling. We don't hate homeschoolers. It's just we chose a different path for our children and for our children's education. That's it. That's nothing more than that.
Mm-hmm.
But the reality is that parents need to understand that their education of their children is on their shoulders,
Right.
not on the schools. I don't care
Right.
what school you have your kid at.
Right. Yeah.
It is your responsibility to educate your children.
Yeah. Yeah.
You
Even
are simply contracting with the
Right,
government to
right.
get that done. That's the
Exactly.
only difference.
Exactly.
So if your kid needs something, it's really on you to get it
Yeah.
fulfilled.
Yeah.
And here's the thing with homeschool parents.
Mhm.
I don't have to be an expert at every possible disability that's out there.
No.
I have to be an expert in my children's disabilities. That's it.
Amen. Amen.
And that's called reading, research, videos. You can do it. Takes time, that's for sure. It takes time. It takes it takes a willingness to do it. It takes a library card.
Right.
Yeah, it does take that.
But the thing is, that's what we're supposed to do as parents,
Absolutely.
right? That's our main job.
Everything.
I mean, our job is not going to work. 8 to 10 hours a day, and
yeah,
right. That's not our job.
And then the other thing that scares me as a Christian about all these kids not being able to read is that they're not going to be able to read the Word of God for themselves.
Right.
How many Christians are going to be led astray because they can't read the Bible?
Yeah.
And they tell us that we're going to have false prophets. We're going to have, Satan coming back again. And if they can't read the Bible for themselves, they can't then know when they're up against falsehood.
Right. And which I have seen a lot, even
it just breaks my heart.
The student in the Christian schools and also kids growing up in church, many of them don't know how to study Bible.
Yeah.
So they have to rely on someone else to kind of spoon fit them. And that's where you could get those problems, the false prophet and all that.
Our family took a sabbatical from church for a year.
Oh, wow.
Because we just didn't feel our children were getting the kind
teaching,
of instruction, the kind of instruction we wanted them to have. And our son at the time, I think, was like 12 or something like that. And we're like, ooh, we're getting into adulthood. And if we don't have some of this stuff, like, this is a problem.
Yeah, I think this is kind of quite common now. Most of the churches, especially bigger churches, the focus is on activities, is to have
Yeah.
funs
Mhm.
instead of go deep in God's word.
Yes.
I mean,
Well, and that's what we do. I mean, we went through, it's a Messianic Jew. His ministry is Ariel.
oh,
And he's actually a biblical scholar. He was the son of a rabbi.
okay.
As soon as he was 18, he was kicked out of the house because he accepted Jesus as a
Wow,
savior at 16.
right. Wow.
So, but he was in Israel, and so he studied the Bible, like, and he
Oh,
also
wow.
understands rabbinic tradition. So when you're reading his stuff, you're also, not only do you get what the Bible is saying, but you also get what the rabbinic tradition says about
Okay.
that,
I see.
which
That's
just adds a depth that you can't. I mean, it's just amazing.
yeah. What's his name?
His name is Arnold, and then I'll spell the last name because it's a hard one.
Oh,
Fruchtenbaum.
wow.
Yeah,
Yeah.
FRUCHTENBAUM.
BAUN.
Yeah.
Sounds
He
like
was,
German.
he was, hang on, where was he born? He was born in Russia,
Oh,
and then his parents fled to Poland,
okay.
and then Kristallnacht happened. Are you familiar with Kristallnacht?
No.
Kristallnacht is when the fascists went through and broke all the windows of Jews' homes and businesses.
Oh,
Kristallnacht.
okay.
So that was the night of the broken crystal.
Oh, okay.
And so they realized they needed to get out.
Oh, okay.
And so they found their way to Italy, I think it was.
Okay.
And at Italy, they were in a refugee camp,
Mm-hmm.
and they eventually got sent to New York.
Oh,
So
okay.
he's got a very funky accent.
New York accent.
No, I mean, it's literally a combination of all of those countries. I mean, I was like, oh my goodness.
Wow.
It takes a little while. It's even for an American, a native English speaker, it takes me a minute to get used to his
Okay.
accent. But you can also get his manuscripts, so you don't have to worry about the accent.
Right. We just kind of read that. Yeah.
But he did a systematic theology
Oh,
course. And so we actually took our kids through some of that.
that's
So that
great.
they got solid instruction on who
Exactly.
is God,
Yeah.
who is Jesus, who is the Holy Spirit.
Yeah.
Because one of the things I noticed with cults in particular, there was usually something wrong with their interpretation of the Trinity.
Right. Yep.
Usually the Trinity is the problem.
Right.
And so, I mean, not to mention also the Bible. Usually they mess up with the Bible as well.
Yeah.
But I wanted to make sure that our kids understood the three
Right.
persons of God.
Right. Right.
And because of that, that would leave them less likely to stray.
Right.
And things like miracles. Most people don't even know what a miracle is.
All right. No.
And do you know there's like 4 different types?
I don't know there's 4 different types.
Well, you need Arnold Fruchtenbaum.
Okay. I need to read his.
And so we got into that kind of depth. And so that's when we were watching TV or whatever, someone was, that's a miracle. And I'd look at the kids and I'd say, was it a miracle? And they're like, no.
Okay.
Like, no.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay. So, so today some of our Christian terminology has been so badly used, it no longer even has a meaning.
Right.
And so, that's the other thing I really wanted our kids to understand is that, no, these things have meanings, and
right. And also
what the culture would say.
Right. And also when you read Bibles, you have to understand what it meant back then. That's where you got, otherwise you will be misled.
Historical context is huge.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, great. I mean, I really want to do another one because there are so many things we can talk about it.
That's why I was like, well, what do you want to talk about? Because there's
Right.
I can think of 105 different things to talk about.
Yeah. But
because we haven't even gotten into any of the laws.
No.
I mean, we can still get into the Constitution, like where do our rights come from for homeschooling, et cetera.
Right.
One of the things that makes it that we're dealing with too is that a lot of people don't understand why homeschool, like our organization in particular, we are vehemently opposed to government funding.
Right.
And one of the reasons is
let's go and talk about next time.
Okay.
We'll spend more
All right.
time actually because it's going to take a longer time to elaborate, to explain it, to get on basically down to the philosophical level.
Well, I can do it fairly quickly with this
Okay.
one thing, but it is that the difference is that I, as a parent, I have not contracted with the government for anything with my
Right.
children. They don't. There's in no way does my education does their education have I given up any parental rights by sending them to a school, any school.
Right.
And because of that, I'm free.
Right.
I have liberty that other parents can't possibly imagine.
Yeah.
And the problem is that parents that then take money, you are willingly giving away your parental rights.
Right.
And you have to know that. And that's not something I'm willing to do.
Right. Yeah, that's something I think we can elaborate next time to help parents to understand. There is one thing I want to end on. I mean, basically, we talk about it. I think is that like there's also this something I like to share with people who want to do homeschooling is that homeschooling is not schooling at home.
No,
we're not going to bring the whole whatever is done in the public school back to home. No. Homeschooling is totally different. It's
a completely different beast.
Right.
It happens on the couch. It happens on the kitchen table, the dining table. It happens on the floor. It happens with your kid upside down on the couch and the floor. It happens on a trampoline. It happens, and it also happens not in the house.
Right. And most time probably it's not in the house.
It's just, somebody who was very naive, obviously said, "You homeschool?" Yeah. Gosh, I just think sitting around the house and doing school all day just sounds boring.
Oh, no.
Like, oh, honey.
No.
I was like, do you seriously think all I do is sit around the house and teach my kids?
Right. No.
I mean, we're so incredibly active and involved that it's just, and I've had to, because of COVID, I've had to like lessen a bunch of what we've been doing. And I'm hoping to get back up to speed. But I mean, I can't think of anything that my kids don't have access to. Last weekend, my son went to homecoming.
Okay.
Last year, he went to prom.
Oh.
My kids are in competitive sports leagues.
Right.
As a matter of fact, my oldest son's soccer team won state championship for homeschool soccer.
Wow.
And they won 4th, which is amazing. They won
4th in the state.
First in the state, and then 4th in the national tournament.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
And that was our own homeschool soccer team. We have soccer, you can pick up art classes. I mean, my kids, it's literally, there's nothing that we want for.
Right.
And we went for a while, we wanted for stuff for dyslexia, but even that we were able to find. And of course now I'm prepared for it and it's not a problem.
Yeah.
And that's the other thing. What people don't understand is that in the school world, it's all very much, well, how much are you going to pay me? What are you going to give me? That's the mentality, or I'm the expert, so what are you going to,
Right.
Whereas within the homeschool world, that's just not how we function.
No.
What can I do to help you?
Right.
Do you need something? What do you need?
Right.
Now, obviously, I'm not going to sit there and tutor your child for you.
Right. That's your responsibility.
Unless you want to pay me, that's okay.
Yeah.
And we have that agreement. But at the same token, if you need me to send you pointers or resources or send you a link, why would I not do that?
Exactly.
It goes back to, it costs you nothing to be nice.
Right. Exactly.
And that's sort of the homeschooler mantra.
Right.
It costs you nothing to be nice. Why would I hold out on another mama?
Exactly.
Why?
Right. And also because money is not the end. Money is the mean. Right? Money is supposed, we use that so that we can help each other.
Well, and honestly,
not to accumulate. Yeah.
And in homeschooling, bartering is just as valid.
Exactly.
As a monetary system.
Yeah.
I mean,
right. Because money is the mean, right?
Absolutely.
If we can achieve the same goal, bartering is perfect.
I mean, I've got to deal with one family where I knew they couldn't afford tutoring. And I said, I tell you what, I need help keeping up with my house cleaning.
Yeah.
Could you help with that?
Right.
They're like, sure.
Of course.
So I'm like, great. I get
Right.
help. I get what I need.
Right.
And they get what they need. And I'm like, this is just why. So it's just a very different.
And there's a huge disadvantage of that.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I need that really more than money.
Well, and also nobody got taxed.
Yeah, exactly right. There's no taxing involved in that. Exactly right.
Right.
So I mean, so there's a lot more to it. I mean, and we have, like, I have my son is being taught biology by an actual high school biology teacher. She just doesn't teach in schools anymore.
Right. You can see a lot of teachers like that now because they retire or they just left the school system. Like I just left the school system. I teach tutoring on doing that. I mean, well,
and in, my son's in American history, and I've only taught a few of his classes, but you better believe that the parents like it when I sit in there because I have expertise there.
Right.
So, and I can explain things and, oh, well, no, you got to remember this. And so this is, we just rub each other's backs is what happens.
Right. Well,
not everybody has the whole ball of wax is what my grandmother used to say.
Yeah.
And so we share wax.
Yeah. There is one thing I really want to do, and so far I haven't been successful. I want to teach parents to teach their kids math.
Yes.
But so far, I haven't had any parents takes up on that.
My problem is time. That's the problem I have right now is time.
Well, you don't really need much time on that.
Oh, have you seen me with math?
Wow, you haven't seen. Well, let's give it a try. Just half an hour. I think I can change your mind about math.
We'll see.
Next time, half hour. Yeah.
We'll see.
Okay.
But yeah, no, I'm honestly, math, I cannot do math to save my life.
Yes, you can. Yes, you can. Yes, you can. I haven't seen anybody cannot do math. It's just like some word gets stuck, and once you open that,
I figured out what it is for me, and it's very random, so you can't correct it all the time because it's just like, ugh. So for me is I always understood the math concepts. The concepts were not hard for me. I'm like, yeah, okay, got it. The problem was I would get to the end and I wouldn't have the right answer.
Ah, okay.
Well, but then after I would go back through everything, I would see that I would transpose a number, or I thought 3, but somehow I wrote 7 down. No idea why. No idea why, but I knew it was 3, but somehow 7 got down. I didn't know. I don't know why.
Is it part of dyslexia?
I think maybe so.
Yeah, because I'm okay with number, but I will put in the wrong words.
See, and it's the opposite for me. It's the numbers. I can't do numbers. If you ask me to memorize words, like if they say, no here, we might memorize these words, I'm like, no problem. They say, here, memorize these numbers.
Nope.
Don't know. So the concepts were never a problem. So it was the random number weirdness.
I think you will enjoy algebra. Yes. Yes. Okay. Anyway, we'll talk next time. Well, it's nice talking with you, and really appreciate it.
Yeah. Well, let's in the future for the next time. Let's have a more of an agenda, that kind of thing, and then that way we can get more of what you want. I mean, I think this was a great conversation. Don't get me wrong.
Right.
But I don't think we got to the information that you wanted.
Right.
So
I think we have time for that. We just like if we couldn't finish in an hour, we just do another one. So yeah. Okay, definitely next time I want to really we can focus on, because I also want to know about what you are doing. So I'm actually getting interested in what you're doing. So it's kind of
and it's been a big year. It's been a big 2 years.
Yeah. Next time I think we can just focus on what I originally trying to do for today's episode is that as someone wants to homeschool my kids, the things I want to learn from you, things I want to get to the right. So we can focus
Yeah.
on that
Yeah.
next time.
Well, and I mean, and that's where I also have like the homeschooling rights and some of that
The
gets into that too, because, you know, that's where we get into Yoda versus Wisconsin. That was a court decision. Well, you had Society of Sisters, which allowed for private schools to exist before, because there was a question whether or not private schools were legal, and that got decided. And then in the so that was back in the 1920s, I think, with Society of Sisters. And then in 1974, you then had the Yoda versus Wisconsin case. And in the Yoda versus Wisconsin case, it said that the parents' religious liberty rights overarch the state interest in education. But it did create a government interest in education insofar that the government expects children to leave literate and self-sufficient. Those are the two really big things: literate and self-sufficient.
And they haven't done a good job on that.
Well, the government themselves have not done a good job of that. That's right. But that's also another thing that says, well, you know, can I graduate my kid? And I'm like, well, are they literate and they're self-sufficient? Can they make their way in their world? If they can't, then the answer needs to be no.
Yeah.
You need to work some more.
Right.
Because that is the litmus test that the government set. You have to be literate. You have to be self-sufficient. But then even within the state of Indiana, we have our own court rulings. Now, we don't have any statutes or laws about homeschooling, like creating homeschooling or otherwise. But we have court cases that lead to homeschooling. And legalize homeschooling. So we have all of that, and that's important to know too, because you need to know your rights. You need to know where they come from.
Right.
Because if you don't know them, you don't know you don't know when they're being thwarted. And that's one of the problems I see with people today is they don't know their rights. They don't understand it. See, all these parents in public school thought they had rights. I already knew they didn't.
I see.
That's why I wasn't in the system.
Right.
I already knew that you gave up those rights, and you still thought you had them.
Right.
And you don't. They've been long gone. Now, yes, they've been usurped. You haven't freely given them to them. The state or the school has just taken them. I admit that.
Right.
But at the same time, once it's taken, it's very difficult to get them back. And in homeschooling, we haven't yielded an inch.
Right.
Because we never did a deal with the government for our children.
Right.
And the minute you start including homeschoolers in government funding, that's when we lose our rights.
Right.
And the problem is right now we have a lot of homeschoolers who were saying, we want government money. Have no idea what they are actually asking that monster that they're fleeing to come into their house.
Right, exactly. Well, I think it's also back to Thomas Paine, right?
Absolutely.
Necessary evil. It's evil.
Necessary evil. But you know what? At least when it's at the school building and not your house, you can shut your front door and say you got to have a warrant.
Right.
But when you actually invite it into your house,
you're right, because you took the money, right?
Open the castle gate. You opened the castle gate.
Yeah.
You lowered the drawbridge over the moat.
Right. Wow. Thank you.
And
I really appreciate
that's part of the problem.
Right. Really appreciate what you have done. So we'll talk about that.
Have you read some of the stuff that I've written?
No,
I've written all kinds of stuff.
Can you send that to me? Yeah, because I can also share that with my audience.
Yeah. So we have I have one. So I have a few of them out there. So they do. Some of them are a little bit older, but they're still relevant. So we had public schools pushing kids out and calling them homeschoolers. That was fun. We had a state senator try to record all homeschool fatalities, child fatalities. No other educational venue or environment was recorded, but they wanted homeschooling to be recorded. We've also had recently, France outlawed homeschooling recently.
Right.
So I did one with a friend on that. I did another one on the colors of education policy. So getting into red for ed, the national school choice, and purple for parents. Also did another one on the dangers of taking government money.
Right. Well, where did you publish it?
through IAHE.
What? Oh, okay.
Through IAHE or IAHE Action.
Okay.
.net.
Okay.
So it's IAHE.net or IAHEaction.net.
Okay.
That's where most of my stuff gets published.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and then I can't remember the most recent one I did. I did
Right,
another
right.
one. But anyways, so there's a lot out there. I've spoken a few places on where our rights come from, as well as just the dangers that are awaiting homeschoolers in this current environment, because really and truly, it's probably more dangerous now than it ever was before.
Oh, really? Why
Yeah,
that?
absolutely. Well, so a few things. So we have our friends wanting to help us by giving us government money, which is not helpful at all. And then on the other side, you have I call it Sauron's eye. Have you seen the Lord of the Rings?
Okay, yeah.
Okay, the Sauron's eye.
Right. Yeah.
You know, so before we were able to kind of, we were Frodo and Sam in the dark. It was all good, but now all of a sudden, Sauron's eye is zoom.
Yeah. Gotcha.
So now they're seriously wanting to start thinking about regulating us and doing things like that.
Because you are threatening them.
Absolutely.
I mean, you get to that. So many homeschool schooler now that become a threat. Yeah.
Well, and we're a threat to them because it affects the money that they get and things like that. So they don't want us to leave the schools.
No, not at all. No.
And the thing is that I think when parents, if they stop to really think about it and they try homeschooling, they'll find that the sacrifices and the things they've had to do without are far outweighed by the relationships they get with their kids.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Because I don't know how you can have a really good, firm relationship. This doesn't mean that you can't, but me being with my kids 24/7 means we know each other.
Right. And that's the bonding, right? That's the development.
And
that's the family connection, the bond.
Well, and after being a child, as I said, from a broken home, multiple times over from various parts of the family, the thing that I can say is I'm building a family. I'm not building. We're not a bunch of people who live at the same address.
Right. Exactly.
We're not cohabitants. We're family.
Exactly.
And we're building those relationships. And I tell you, lockdown was great.
Yeah.
We loved it. We loved quarantine. We had a blast. I mean, the kids would say it was a little bit less fun because they didn't get to see their friends, which okay. Yeah. But at the same time, we had so much fun.
Right.
We really did. We played games. We did projects together. Just all kinds of stuff. And I was like, this is why we homeschool.
Right.
This right here, this microcosm that we have. And here's the thing: when you have a family like that, that's that close, it threatens government authority.
Oh yeah.
And that's why most governments that want to control, the first thing they do is break down the family.
Oh yeah, because then you have to rely on the government, and then the government. That's how the government become bigger and bigger. Yeah.
Yep. So that's my small little attempt. That's my small little attempt at making sure that my kids don't live in a totalitarian government.
Right. Exactly.
I don't know. I mean, maybe I'm just too small a cog there, but.
Well, no. There's more and more people like that, like
I'm glad people are waking up, but again, I want to stress, if you're thinking about homeschooling, and one of the things that's really big for the dads that they're really concerned about is the ability to play in sports. Stop it.
Right. You can.
You really think that all these homeschoolers don't want to play sports?
Right.
We do all the time. Yeah. As a matter of fact, my husband's an athletic director for a soccer program with over 166 athletes in it.
Oh, wow. That's so cool.
You can play sports.
Right.
And if there's enough people playing in these sports teams, you don't think that colleges won't look there eventually? Really?
Well,
if your kid's good enough, they'll look.
Exactly.
And so that's something else I wanted to say to dads out there. It's just that stop it.
Right.
And even if you don't have a team near you, I bet you could do one. And just
the
mentality. Yeah. Well, and the mentality of homeschoolers are, we're not going to send you, let you get on with it. If you need help, we'll help you set the dang thing up.
Amen.
But and this is the other thing I've had to tell like people coming out of the public schools. I'm like, because they're like, oh, we're so lonely, we don't have it. I'm like, well, you have to go to it.
Right.
Like, this doesn't come to you, and it
Make
doesn't just
effort.
happen.
Make effort. Yeah.
You have to like do it, or
Right.
invite people over,
Right.
or you have to be willing to lead it,
Right.
or teach it,
Right.
or help with it, or
Right.
make the snacks, or
Right.
this is no longer well, the government does it for you.
No.
We
Stay
parents have to.
stay away from the government as far as you can.
Yeah, well, yeah, I mean, because that's exactly right. I mean,
Right.
and the problem is that so much, well, what they say, absolute power corrupts absolutely.
Yeah.
And the other thing is that we have to remember is the golden rule. And I don't mean the Christian golden rule. You know the golden rule?
No.
He
Not.
who has the gold rules.
Oh yeah. Right. I know that one.
And that's honestly, that was what it boils down to. If you think you can accept government money and still conduct your school,
Now
and
there
it's
is
going to stay that
always
way.
string attached. And I saw this when that happened to the Christian schools, and that was the time I decided to
With
leave.
the vouchers?
Yeah, that's the time I decided to leave Greenwood Christian Academy.
Well, and see, here's the interesting thing is with that voucher legislation,
Mhm.
they actually have in there written protections for the Christian schools. Did you know that?
No.
Mhm. They
Okay.
wrote in legislative protections for Christian schools who were taking government vouchers,
What kind of protection?
that it wouldn't affect, that the vouchers would not affect their atmosphere or their curricula choice, or I mean, it went on and on and on and on. And that was the promise from the
Okay.
legislators.
But don't believe that.
It's not happening.
Don't believe that.
No, exactly. And the thing is all these legislators are wanting to say, oh, well, we'll do that for the homeschoolers. We'll put in protective language for homeschoolers. I'm like, no, you won't, because you'll just ignore it anyway.
Right.
That's what you did with the private schools.
Right.
I mean, and so I love how people say, well, you don't know what they're going to do. You can't possibly. I'm like, yes, I can. I can look at the private school vouchers.
Right.
Right there's all you need. That's the proof.
Yeah. We're going to talk about that next time. Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you so much. It has taken a lot your time, but I really enjoy like talking with you.
No problem. Hey, how many followers do you have these days?
For this one, normally put the episode, we probably got to the 50 to 100 people watching it to review it. Yeah.
Cool.
So I think as more people heard about it, and you'll kind of grow.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and also,
great.
Yeah, and also, in a way, it's personal too, because I got to talk to people like you, and I think we really need those kind of conversation going on.
Absolutely. It's
so
great now more than ever.
Right. Otherwise, we just say hello and how you doing and all that, and we just move on. Yeah.
Yeah.
And right now, I think just like I said, it come down to now, we need to protect those kids. We need to save those kids. It's just that urgent. So we really need to.
And the thing is that, and one of the prayers that I've had lately is I've been praying in particular that God would turn the hearts of the fathers towards their children.
Yeah.
Because I really see, so even homeschooling is a mother's movement.
Right. Well, when I was teaching at the GCA, and that was kind of very sad to me, is that no dad came to me to talk about their kids, always moms.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the thing is that that's what's really that's what's making me, I was concerned about that even within the homeschool community.
Right.
And I'm fortunate. I'm incredibly fortunate that even though my husband's a school teacher, he is 110% supportive of us homeschooling.
Mm-hmm.
He recognizes it as being the best thing for our children,
right.
And that that's what he wants for our kids.
Mm-hmm.
And he approves of the job that I'm doing and all of that kind of. I mean, obviously, if I wasn't doing it well, he would be like, but I mean, actually, really, truly, technically our homeschool also has a principal, so who's actually a real principal. So he has his administrative license. So
Right.
so I guess he's our administrator, I guess.
Okay.
But
Well, which means he's on the hook.
yeah. Yeah, but I got to thank
Well,
the principal though.
right. But then, I mean, the Bible has made that clear. I mean, educate our children first of all is to the dad.
Yeah.
Right. So
and my husband takes it very seriously,
right.
and even though he's not always the one teaching or anything, although he does teach math,
Okay.
even though he's not always the one teaching, but when he has time off, when he has a break or anything like that, and one of the kids' classes or whatever is happening, he will go and attend.
Right.
Because one of the things that he recognizes, and I have stressed to him, is that you're just showing up to be there,
Mm-hmm.
says it means enough to you,
Right.
for you to spend time there, and that is that important,
Right.
that our children should not take it too lightly.
Right.
And that is something that is, and then a few times, like I've been teaching or directing or doing whatever I'm supposed to be doing in that particular setting, and my husband would walk away and he'd say, I did not like how they treated you, as in our children.
Ah.
And he would say, absolutely not. They were
Right.
disrespectful to my
Right.
wife.
Right. Right.
And so as a mom, I appreciate the fact that my husband is backing me up and
Right.
saying, you
Right.
will
Right.
not treat your mother that way.
Right.
If I hear any reports of you again, I will. And so I'm blessed with having that in our house.
Right.
But I know so many other homeschool moms do not have that.
No. No.
They've actually probably the vast majority.
All right. It's definitely the vast
sad.
majority. Yeah.
And so my biggest prayer really is that the hearts of their fathers will go towards their children again. Because I think we have a nation and a society is in desperate need of that.
Oh yeah.
I think it's been brought on by our social culture of no fault divorce.
Right.
Now we have how many? I think it's something like 70% of Black babies are born out of wedlock.
Right. Yeah.
And female-headed households.
Right.
There's this notion that men are no longer needed.
Right.
And,
well, because the government said, I can help you.
Oh yeah, the government says, I'll provide for you. I'll be your provider, baby.
Right.
That's fine.
Right.
And it's like, no. No. And the thing is as a girl who largely grew up without her father, I know that that's not a good thing.
No.
It's not a good thing. And our dads have got to step up.
Yeah. Well,
and
yeah.
I know they love us, and I know they love their children.
Right.
But it also means you have to, we need to see you at the school board meetings if that's something you care about.
Right.
We need to see you, you need to be the ones that are saying, why aren't you respecting your mother while she's trying to teach you math or whatever it is?
Yeah. I think the very encouraged sign is that more and more dads are coming to school board meetings.
I like that.
So
I'm glad
really,
for that.
yeah.
And it has to happen.
Yeah.
And when a father isn't active in protecting of their children, a lot of bad things happen.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I think it's just like now more and more parents realize how dangerous the schools are to their kids. So now they want to protect their kids.
Right.
So,
well, and the problem is that what you've got a system that has said, they're not your kids, they're our kids.
Right.
They've already decided that.
Right. But
that's how they're acting.
Yeah. But fortunately, in this country, parents have the choice. Parents have
they do
the
but
authority
to keep government out of it.
Right.
If government comes into it by giving us money,
right,
we'll just be in the exact same quagmire.
Right. Exactly.
It won't get any better. So that's my concern. But anyways, that's my prayer. My prayer is always for the fathers to try.
Right. Yeah, definitely.
And obviously there are so many supports out there now that really and truly there's
right. And also you see that especially when the kids get become teenagers, they really need the dad.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. Absolutely.
Right.
Well, and especially I would say in particular the boys.
Right.
I mean, there comes a point in time. Yeah, I homeschool my teenage boys, but I also there's a time where I'm like, okay, honey, you need to take care of this.
Right.
This is what I've done. This is what I've said.
Right.
It now needs a dad to come in and say it.
Yeah.
I can't. I mean, I've done what I can do.
Right.
Now you need to go in and reinforce what our family standards are on that.
Right. Yeah. And also teach your son to be a dad.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And that's what definitely needed.
I mean, he decided to go into teaching and that sort of thing because he wanted that time with kids.
Right.
He wants to be home with his children.
Yeah. And I can see that when I was teaching at GCA, being a male have different dynamics.
Oh, very.
And yeah.
Very. I mean, my husband's 6 foot and he's not a small man. But he works with the kids nobody wants to work with.
Right, right.
You know, the kids that get shot, the kids who are disrespectful. I mean, like throwing chairs, kind of disrespectful,
Right.
stabbing with pencils. I mean, yeah, fun kids. Those are the kids he works with.
Right.
And the reality is a woman would not work with those kids well.
No.
For a lot of reasons.
Right.
One, a woman's not intimidating to them.
Right.
They wouldn't think twice.
Right.
About doing something bad. But you have a big 6 foot guy in there and they're going, oh, wait.
Yeah.
Wait a minute.
Right.
And so there is that. And then also when he was working with the younger kids, you know, he saw how women were working with this one child who has a behavior problem. And he's just like, that's not what that kid needs.
Right.
He doesn't need that.
Right.
He thinks and he's like, I'm looking at this kid and he's just like, he's offended by what they're doing.
Right.
And so the reason they're not getting the kind of results that they're wanting is because it's not reaching the kid.
Right.
But he was able to go in and work with him differently.
Yeah.
As a guy would do it, as a dad would do it.
Right.
And he could get results out of that kid. Why? Because he understood the male mind.
Right. Exactly.
And the problem is, and we've even seen it. I mean, there's so many schools around here that discriminate against men being teachers. It's not even funny.
Right.
And the number one thing I think most boys in schools today need is a man.
Yeah.
And it's not because I'm sexist. Or
No.
I want to turn back the clock. I am a pretty strong woman.
Right.
But at the same token, I also understand that, you know, God gave us 2 genders.
Right.
And just like he gave us the Jews and the Gentiles,
right.
One brings in the tables,
Yeah.
one brings in the chairs. It's the same thing with men and women.
Right.
You know, women bring certain things to bear, men bring the other, and children need both.
Sure, need
both. One
both.
out, and the children suffer, and you won't get the kind of behavior you want from them.
Right. Right. Exactly. Because like, it's kind of a bit oversimplified, but it's as a man, we are more focused. Like, okay, no, don't give up. You know, I mean, even you are bloody or something like that, that's no problem. Just keep at it, and you know. Well,
and it's also a lot of like keeping your word.
Right.
And, so like a lot of how my husband would work with him is like, look, here's what we're going to do. Here's the deal. Are you going to agree with that? And then if he didn't hold up to the deal, held him accountable for it.
Right.
We didn't mess around with stickers.
No. but that's the one side of it, right? You need someone there to push, right? To say, okay, don't give up. I mean, this is really, you haven't tried hard enough, right? And that's normally the male can provide that. Mm-hmm. And the female side, I mean, let's say as a mom is more, oh, honey, you know, you need so you need the both.
Kids need kicks in the pants sometimes.
Right. But you need the both, right?
You know, because, I mean, in our house, I probably do a little bit more of the kicking than my husband does. But they need both sides.
Yeah, they need both.
I mean, he has a very different approach than I do. And they need both.
Yeah.
They don't need one or the other. They have to have both.
Have to work together. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's actually what gives kids stability.
Right.
Dads bring men give kids stability because they feel secure.
Secure, yeah.
Excuse me.
Right.
And that's the thing I think society has forgotten about. I
Right.
read a book many, many years ago, back when I was working on the marriage issue, called
Mhm.
Fatherless America. And it was fascinating. They said one of the reasons why today's men are so, or and fathers in particular, are so loosey-goosey within the family is because there's no longer any defined role for
Right.
the
No.
husband or the father
Right.
in a family anymore. There's nothing
Right.
defined.
Right.
Well, if you go back about 200 years, it was considered the man's the father, I should say, the father's
Right.
responsibility was the education of the children.
Oh yeah, of course.
It was
And
their responsibility.
right.
If a child was illiterate and not well educated, it was a direct reflection on the father,
Right.
not on the mother. Had
No.
nothing to do with the
No.
mother.
No.
And that's why when you go and you look at the early school boards,
Right.
the little one-room schoolhouse,
Yeah.
all the school boards are all male names. And it's
Right.
not because they were being sexist, it was because that was their
Right.
job.
That's
That
their
was their societal
responsibility.
role.
Yeah.
Um, and so I think there's a lot of feminism has turned some of that on its head, saying, well,
Right.
it's because they were a bunch of
Yeah.
sexist
Yeah.
men.
Yeah.
No, it's
No.
because that was the given role of the men in society at that time.
Yeah.
And I don't think that was a bad role for men to have.
No. No. And that's they should have. And like you
Absolutely.
said, it's a lot right now. Men kind of lost identity in the society,
Yeah.
and which is kind of very yeah.
And that's that's actually what the whole book was about, was,
right.
you know, just that loss of identity for males. And so now
Right.
males don't know what to do. How do you be a father? What is a
Right.
father?
Yeah.
Doubly hard for those who were raised in a home with a single parent,
Yeah.
who was their mother.
Right.
You know, so what does it mean? And that is you know, fortunately, my husband does not come from a broken home, and he had a good father, and so he had a role model to go
Right.
on.
Right.
That was one thing I did for myself. I told myself before when I was dating guys, I said, I will
Yeah.
never marry a man who comes from a divorced home. And it
Oh.
wasn't because, it was just because I knew I didn't have the skills and I didn't have the knowledge, because it wasn't modeled for me.
Right. But you need someone who.
I
Yeah.
needed someone who had those skills, who had seen it. And
Mhm.
I needed someone within my network that could coach me on the
Right.
right way to look at things. And so I've actually become very, very close and very, very good friends with my mother-in-law,
Ah. Okay.
because I know that she has the right perspective to stay married.
Right.
But here's the thing, she's not a Christian.
Oh wow.
She's not a Christian. My husband's family, none of them are saved.
Wow.
So but the good thing
But
is that
but he practiced what a Christian should.
yes,
Right.
they're the Christians that are the hardest to save.
Yeah. I know. I
And,
know. I know.
you know, because they live their lives actually a lot better than a lot of Christians
Right.
I've
Right.
met.
Right. Yeah.
But you know, she has great insight
Right.
and great advice about how you stay married. And you know
Yeah.
what? I listen.
Yeah.
I listen to my mother-in-law.
Yeah.
And I know other people. I mean, you see all those mother-in-law jokes, and it's just like,
Right. Right.
I
Right.
love my mother-in-law.
Right.
And you know, and of course everybody, you know, and the same thing on her side, because she lives in England. You know, they'll start complaining. Her friends will start complaining about their daughter-in-laws, and they'll just look at her and she goes, well, we know you don't understand, because I'm genuinely loved by my in-laws.
Right.
And
That's
so, you know, but that was something else I did, is I made sure that I got a husband from a good family,
wow.
that though they weren't saved, but you know what, they were a good family,
Right.
and they love each other.
Yeah. Wow.
What more can you ask?
Right.
Well, other than Christ, but
Okay. Okay. Okay.
I would
Well,
love to see them saved, but
I see. Oh, well, we'll talk next time. Well,
yep.
thank you
All
so
right.
much. It's
Welcome.
it's really fun. Okay.
Do you have my, so are you going to have me just as Allison, or are you going to have me as IHE? Do you want my title for IHE?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
Yeah. So
Senior,
well,
I'll text it to you. I can
you
send it to
text
you.
me. Yeah. You text me what you do at the
Yep.
IAH. It's
IAHE, yeah. IAHE, Indiana Association of Home.
IAHE, right?
Yes.
Yeah. How do you
Indiana
say that?
Association of Home Educators.
IAG. IAHE, right?
E, the vowel. Yeah. Educators.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So Indiana Association of Home Educators.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I like that. Home educators. I like that. Yep. It is education. It's not schooling.
No. absolutely.
Okay.
No, it is. Well, I mean, there's a certain amount of schooling that happens, but it's a whole lot more. I
Right.
mean, there's so much more to it than that. I mean, it's
Yeah.
just, you know,
I mean, it's really about how to educate him. Schooling is a mean to an end.
Yeah.
But the end is educating our kids.
it's only one, what do I want to say? It's only one approach to instruction.
Right.
There's
Right.
multiple ways to
There are
instruct.
multiple ways of doing it. Yeah.
Yeah, there's lots of ways to instruct, and that's
Right.
just one of them.
Right.
And we just utilize lots of different tools and methods of instruction to get the job done.
Right.
Because, you know, for like in our family, we have non-typical learners, so
Right.
we've got to do things a little differently.
Yeah.
And that's okay.
All right. That's okay. Perfect. Okay.
Mhm.
Well,
All right.
thank you so much.
You're welcome.
I'll see you
Have a
next
great night.
time. Yep.
Yep. All right. Yeah. Bye-bye.
Bye.